if you're a capable, high-functioning parent who keeps snapping at your kids when you're exhausted, it's because your nervous system is stuck in fight or flight. And I've been there. Just moments before dinner with both of my hangry kids screaming at each ear as I was holding them one in each arm. And I felt that surge, my shoulders coming up, my teeth clenched, and old me would have totally snapped. But I'm a firefighter, and I've trained to regulate when everything is on fire. And I use that same command system to help parents lead their families without yelling, spiraling, or collapsing into guilt. So in this masterclass, we're going to walk through the 3-part Regulate, Reframe, and Repair framework I use under pressure. So we can stop reacting and start leading, so that our children feel safe with us and we feel like ourselves again. People think parenting is about techniques. It's not. It's about state. And when I say state, I don't mean just state of mind. I mean our state of being, our physiology, our nervous system, our breath, our tone, our posture. Essentially the vibe that we bring into a room. And here's what I've learned through firefighting, therapy, and motherhood. The quality of our state sets the ceiling for our relationships. So when our brain senses threat, whether that threat is smoke in the hallway or our toddler screaming at 3 a.m., our social engagement system downshifts, meaning our body moves from connection mode into protection mode. And protection mode looks something like this. Our face tighten, our tone sharpen, and our curiosity is just completely gone. Our bodies shift into defensiveness instead of connection. And that's when we put up our walls, we're not as flexible, we become more controlling, and play just disappears. And it's really hard to connect from that place. So before we even talk about boundaries or discipline or thriving, we're going to talk about the state of being. Because nothing sticks when our nervous system feels unsafe. And safety isn't theoretical. It's physiological. When our physiology is calm, our flexibility increases. Heart rate variability is simply an indicator of how adaptable our nervous system is. And adaptable nervous systems create adaptable families. So today, we're building from the inside out. Presence isn't something we decide. It's something that we allow our bodies to do. Because nothing sticks when our nervous system feels unsafe. Attention and regulation are trained through repetition. Our brain rewires around what we repeatedly practice under pressure. And now I want you to notice something right now before we even go any further. So here we go. Take a very slow inhale and a long exhale. Did your shoulders drop even just a little bit? Because that's the mechanism. Presence is physiological and it is totally trainable. So in this masterclass, we're gonna walk through a simple, clear framework. Regulate, reframe, and repair. So we can stop reacting and just start leading. So that our children feel safe with us and that we feel like ourselves again. Because when our state of being shifts, everything downstream shifts with it. Our tone shifts, our pacing shifts, our breath shifts. And our children feel it before we even say a single word. The field guide is linked below. It walks you through this step by step. So grab it and keep it close to you for when things get loud. Module 1, what present parenting is and isn't. So if state of being is the foundation, then present parenting is not a technique. It's not a script. It's not gentle parenting versus strict. It's not permissive. And it's definitely not reactive. Present parenting is not being permissive. It's not letting behavior slide. It's not avoiding discomfort. It's not martyrdom. What it is, it's attuned structure. It's calm authority because we're not raising compliant children. We're raising capable ones. And that distinction really matters. Because when a child makes a mistake, the goal is not obedience. The goal is learning. And the goal is mastery of their own emotions. Consequences that mirror cause and effect teach mastery. Punishment teaches avoidance. And present parenting teaches cause and effect and not fear. And there are science behind this. Because when a child feels shamed, their survival circuitry lights up. The brain shifts into protection mode, and the prefrontal cortex, which is the part responsible for problem solving and reflection, goes completely offline. So if we escalate, if we shame, if we threaten connection, we're not increasing learning, we're decreasing it. But when behavior is named clearly while identity is protected, our brain stays online. That behavior isn't okay. It's very different from you are bad. Because warmth with boundaries lowers threat while maintaining predictability. And predictability regulates our nervous systems, especially little ones. So let me show you what this looks like in real life. The other night, my 2-year-old broke a ceramic spoon that my husband gave me for Christmas. And it was beautiful. I absolutely, genuinely love that spoon. It was dinner time on a solo parenting day, and it was the end of the night and had been present all day. So yes, I'm human too. He had his own spoon, but he was curious about ours. So his sister, Amelia, and I had these ceramic spoons, and everyone else had them, so he wanted his own. And honestly, I just wasn't about to battle about it and reason with him, so I just let him use it. And of course, he dropped it, and it completely shattered. Old me would have snapped, because especially at the end of a long day, broken things, mess, fatigue, overstimulation, those are all triggers for me. But instead, I did my physiological sigh, which is 2 inhales and a long exhale. And then an om, because that's my super quick reset. My state of being comes first. So I picked up all the broken pieces, I looked him right in the eyes, and I basically said, yeah, this spoon is broken, and that's really too bad because I really liked it. I'm a little bummed, but I totally understand that it was an accident. But next time, you'll have to hold it a little carefully and keep it away from the edge. There was no shame, no yelling, just reality, naming my emotions and holding the boundary. And then my 4-year-old said something like this. She had been picking up all sorts of phrases from kindergarten lately, and she said that we can't love you anymore. And that stopped me, because that's not something we say in our home, and honestly, it kind of saddened me for the child that she learned it from. So I immediately said, that's not true. I will always love you no matter what happens. Mistakes don't change love, because that is a non-negotiable in our family. Things can break, accidents can totally happen, and we can feel disconnected. But love does not get withdrawn. And then something really interesting happened. I gave my toddler another ceramic spoon. I know, it's kind of crazy, but I did. I trusted my gut. And this time he didn't bang it. He just held it up to his face and he was just studying it. And then he placed it down very gently on the table. So at that moment, he didn't learn to fear breaking things. He learned how to handle things with care and with respect. So this is attuned structure, and that's calm authority. That is cause and effect without fear. We're not raising children who behave because they're afraid. We're raising children who understand why their behavior matters. There's a difference between that. And this is where we move deeper. Because honestly, staying regulated in those moments is not always easy, because nothing sticks when the nervous system feels unsafe. We can't lecture a brain that is in defense mode. We can't teach a child whose body thinks connection is at risk. And this applies to us as well, because if we're dysregulated, exhausted, overstimulated, our flexibility drops, our voice sharpens, and we put up a wall. We're not as flexible, and play just completely disappears. And in that moment, the boundary may be correct, but the delivery will be missed. Present parenting is not about perfection. It's about awareness. It's about catching the moment before it escalates. It's about choosing to model the nervous system we want our children to internalize. Because here's the truth. Our children will not remember what we say, but they'll remember how we were being. And they'll remember whether mistakes felt scary or safe, whether boundaries felt steady or explosive, and whether love felt constant or conditional. And this is why we start here. We start with attuned structure. We start with calm authority. We start with protecting identity while addressing behavior. Because when dignity is intact, growth is possible. When safety is intact, learning sticks. So let's zoom out for a second, because if you didn't grow up with this kind of modeling, which I personally didn't, it doesn't mean that we're broken. We just didn't get the reps in. Because attention and regulation are trained through repetition. Our brain rewires around us what we repeatedly practice under pressure. So if we were raised in a home where anger was loud, or silence was the punishment, or making a mess meant danger, we might feel those patterns come up automatically. And that doesn't mean that we're doomed. It just means that those circuits are really strong. And strong circuits can be rewired, but only if we take the moment to notice them. So present parenting begins with this radical shift. Before I correct my child, I regulate myself. Before I teach the skill, I stabilize my state of being. Because nothing sticks when the nervous system feels unsafe. And that brings us to something most parents have a really hard time separating clearly. Our child's emotions are not ours. And it is definitely not a reflection of our ability to parent. And if we don't understand that distinction, we burn out really fast. Because every meltdown, every sibling fight, every messy morning is an opportunity to train the nervous system, ours and theirs. And this is where we go next. Module 2. Our child's emotions are not ours. So we just ended with this distinction. Our child's emotions are not ours, and it is not a reflection of our ability to parent. This right here is one of the biggest shifts that prevents burnout, because emotions are contagious. Our breath rate affects theirs. Our tone influences theirs, our posture, our pacing, our nervous system, they mirror it. Children are wired to sync with the adult nervous system in the room. That's how co-regulation works. But here's the trap. When our child melts down, screams, cries, or panics, our body may interpret that as threat. Not because we're a bad parent, but because our nervous system hears loud emotions as danger. And when our brain senses threat, our social engagement downshifts, meaning our body moves from connection mode into protection mode. Our face tightens, our tone sharpens, our curiosity disappears, and our body shifts into defense. And suddenly, we're not responding to our child. We're reacting to our own nervous system. And this is where most of us kind of get pulled under. Because instead of thinking, my child is overwhelmed, we think, I need to stop this. But our child's emotion is just data. It's not danger. And here's something really powerful. When we label an emotion, it reduces amygdala reactivity and it increases prefrontal control. This is sometimes called the tame it to name it effect. And this works both ways. So instead of becoming the anger, we say, I feel angry. Instead of becoming the overwhelm, we say, I feel overwhelmed. Notice the language. Not I am angry, but I feel anger. That separation gives us back choice and puts us back in the driver's seat. It tells our nervous system that this is a state and not my identity. And this is critical because children are born with all of the emotions, but none of the tools to handle them. Their bodies are experiencing big physiological waves with no interior regulator built yet. So our job is not to eliminate the wave, but to teach them how to ride it. If our child is screaming and we match their volume, we're adding adrenaline to adrenaline. And if our child is dysregulated and we tense up, we shrink the emotional space in the room. But if we breathe slowly, even a slightly exaggerated exhale, their nervous system begins to match ours. This is not theory, this is just biology. Our breath is a signal, our pacing is a signal, our grounded state is a signal. We're teaching regulation through embodiment, not instruction. And that's why that separation matters. Our child's emotion is not our emotion. It is not proof that we failed. It is not evidence that we've done something wrong. It is just an opportunity to train our nervous system, ours and theirs. And I want to be very, very honest here. Sometimes our child's emotions will activate something that's older in us, something that's very deep. It can be a certain tone, a certain look, a level of chaos, and our body will react before our mind catches up. This doesn't make us broken. It just means that we have strong circuits built through repetition. Remember, attention and regulation are trained through repetition. Our brain rewires around us what we repeatedly practice under pressure. So let me give you a very real example. One day, both of my kids were screaming directly into my ears, and I was holding them one in each arm. They had been fighting with each other, and in the moment of shared frustration, they decided to both scream at the exact same time, really loudly into my ear. And I felt it deep in my bones. The surge, the body tensing up, the irritation just rising fast. And old me would have completely snapped. I probably would have said enough. But I had been meditating regularly with this guided meditation that includes Om as a chant. And in that moment, without even thinking about it, I just blurted out a very long Om. and both of them just froze. They looked at me like I was an alien and then bursted out laughing, like full on belly laughing. And I started laughing too. And the whole entire room shifted in seconds. So later, because I'm just curious about these things, I looked into what actually happened neurologically, and here's what I found. When you voice a long om while triggered, 3 things tend to happen. First is the brain breath reset. The sustained slow exhale increases vagal influence on the heart, lowering arousal and giving our prefrontal choice networks more control. And second is the resonance effect. The vibration in our chest and throat stimulates vagal pathways and smooth our vocal tone, signaling that it's safe to connect to our system. And third, our default mode network, which is our autopilot and identity network, quiets down. Rhythmic toning with focus down can quiet the default mode network, which is the self-referential reactive thinking loop that reduces rumination and reactivity, so we can respond instead of react. So now that's my go-to reset for when I feel triggered. And here's the beautiful part. Both my kids started doing it, especially my 2-year-old when his sibling screams or he feels overwhelmed because he doesn't have as many words. So sometimes he'll just go home. And that's not because I lectured him and not because I taught him a breathing workshop. It's because he watched me regulate. And that's co-regulation. And that's why that separation matters so much. If we don't separate our state from our child state, we merge. And when we merge, we amplify. But when we stabilize ourselves, we lead. And this is the opportunity a lot of us miss. Not because we're incapable, but because no one taught us the mechanism. Our child's emotion is not our failure. It is information. It's practice. It's the curriculum. And if we didn't grow up with this modeling, we're not behind. We just didn't get the reps in. Strong circuits feel automatically, but strong circuits can be completely rewired. Only if we notice them. Only if we pause long enough to choose differently. And this is where the work deepens. Because sometimes what gets activated in us isn't just the moment. It's history. It's a pattern. It's protection. And that's where we're going to go next. And I want to be very honest here, because sometimes your child's emotions will activate something that's really deep in you. A certain look, a level of chaos, and your body will react before our mind catches up. That doesn't mean we're broken. It just means that we have strong circuits. Circuits built through repetition. Attention and regulation are built through repetition. Our brain rewires around what we repeatedly practice under pressure. So if we grew up in a home where loud emotion meant danger, or silence meant withdrawal of love, or anger meant humiliation, our body might still interpret that as if the threat is present, like as it is happening right now. We might feel those patterns come up automatically. That doesn't mean that we're doomed. It just means that those circuits are strong, and strong circuits can be rewired, but only if we take the moment to notice them. And noticing begins in our body. So notice when our shoulders are up, when our jaw is clenching, when we're holding our breath, when we're short with our answers. Those are the early cues. And that's the moment where we choose. And here's the shift that changes everything. Because instead of asking, how do I stop my child from feeling this? We ask, how do I stay regulated while they feel this? And that's leadership. Because when we stay steady in the presence of their storm, we teach something far more valuable than obedience. We teach them that feelings are survivable. Connections remain. Love is not withdrawn. And regulation is possible. And this is where we move deeper. Because separating emotion is one thing, but learning how to process the full emotional spectrum without suppressing it is another. So let's go there next. Module 3. The full emotional spectrum. So we just established something critical. Our child's emotions are not ours, and it is not a reflection of our ability to parent. Now we go one layer deeper. Because separation is one thing, but regulation requires something a little more. We cannot teach what we're unwilling to feel. And most of us were not raised to feel the full emotional spectrum. We were raised to manage it, suppress it, minimize it, or explode with it. So here's what happens. When emotion is suppressed, it doesn't disappear. It just lingers in the sympathetic nervous system. and it activates our stress response, aka fight or flight. And it shows up as irritability, sarcasm, withdrawal, or control. Processed emotions completes the stress cycle, and suppressed emotions keep it open. That's physiology. If anger never gets metabolized, it becomes tension. If grief never gets processed, it becomes numbness. If fear never gets acknowledged, it becomes control. And then we pass those patterns down. Emotional granularity, which is the ability to name specific feelings, correlates with better regulation and fewer impulsive behaviors. So not just mad, but frustrated, disappointed, overstimulated, embarrassed, overwhelmed, lonely. The more precise we label it, the less intense the reaction. When our prefrontal cortex engages, it guides interpretation and it sets a response strategy, helping modulate the amygdala's alarm so signals become more usable instead of overwhelming. Think of the prefrontal cortex as the system that organizes options and biases our next move. The amygdala flags what feels relevant or potentially threatening and can trigger fight or flight. And under high stress, our prefrontal drops and old patterns return. So clear labeling paired with a steady breath brings our prefrontal guidance back online so that you can interpret what you feel. You can choose your response and return to present to stay in play. Feelings are physiological states. They're waves. They're not our identity. So let's get clear about something. Children are born with all of the emotions. Anger is there. Joy is there. Fear is there. Grief, frustration, those are all there. What is not fully built is the regulatory system. They feel everything fully, and they don't know what to do with it yet. So that's where we come in. We're not here to eliminate the emotion, but to model how to move through it. So understand this. When anger shows up, it is not a flaw. When fear shows up, it's not fragility. When grief shows up, it's not weakness. Allowing anger does not create aggression. Allowing grief does not create weakness. And allowing fear does not create fragility. But suppressing emotion keeps the sympathetic nervous system activated. And processing emotion completes the stress cycle. So when our child throws themselves on the floor because their toes broke in half, that's not irrationality. That's their nervous system experiencing a full stress response without internal regulation. So if you respond with, it's just toast, stop overreacting and get over it, we're not teaching resilience, we're teaching suppression. But if we say, I see that you're upset because your toes broke, we are giving them their nervous system language by helping label and identify the feeling that they're experiencing. So when an emotion is named, their brain shifts from alarm mode into regulation. And I'll add a deeper layer. We have to be able to sit with our own discomfort while they feel that. Because if their anger makes us anxious, if their sadness makes us impatient, if their crying makes us want to shut down, we will try to quiet them so we don't have to feel it. And that's where control replaces connection. Not because we don't care, but because our nervous system is uncomfortable. So this is the real work. Can we feel steady while they're having big feelings? Can we hold the wave without trying to flatten it? Because when we can, something powerful happens. Their nervous system learns that big feelings are safe. Emotion does not equal abandonment. Expression does not equal the loss of love. Connection doesn't disappear. I can feel this and come back. That's regulation. That is attachment theory taking root right there. And this is important. We don't have to be perfect at this. We just need to be willing to feel. Because every time we allow an emotion to rise and fall without shutting it down, we are teaching that feelings are temporary. Connection is stable and I can survive this wave. And that is resilience, not suppression, not toughness. Now here's the truth that a lot of people won't say out loud. The reason we avoid certain emotions in our children is because they activate some unfinished emotions in us. And this is where we're going to go next. Because once we allow the full emotional spectrum, we will start to notice our own triggers. And that's where real mastery begins. So let's go to Module 4. Module 4, triggers, patterns, and rewiring. So now we go from emotions to triggers. Because once we allow the full emotional spectrum in our children, something uncomfortable starts to happen. We start noticing our own. And a trigger is not bad behavior. A trigger is not our child being difficult. A trigger is a stored memory pattern paired with a fast autonomic response. It is our nervous system reacting before our thinking brain even has time to evaluate. It's our nervous system running an old program. When a sensory cue appears, so certain sound, tone, posture disorder, our amygdala and brainstem light up before our prefrontal cortex even evaluates what's going on. So our shoulders are up, our back is up, our jaw tightens, our breath shortens, our voice is sharp. That's sympathetic activation. That's our fight or flight. When our body is moving into protection mode. And it happens really fast. Sometimes so fast that we think it's about the moment, but often it's not about the moment. It's about what the moment reminds you of. And here's what makes it more intense. Cognitive overload shrinks your working bandwidth. So when you already have like 27 tabs open in your brain, when we're tired, when we're overstimulated, when we're rushing, minor cues feel really big. Not because they are, but because our nervous system is taxed. So let me give you a personal example. Mess is a trigger for me because growing up, mess was not allowed. Mess meant tension. Mess meant my dad was about to get angry. Chaos meant unpredictability. So somewhere along the way, my brain wired mess leads to tension, which leads to danger. It's the Hebb's law of neurons that fire together, wire together. So mess for me meant danger. And now let's add in my ADHD brain and noise and time pressure and two kids fighting. So the thing about mess is that the visual clutter increases your cue load, meaning your brain has to sort through more stimuli at once. More cues mean more stimulation. And more stimulation raises norepinephrine, which is our stress and alertness chemical. And when arousal climbs too high, executive control drops, which means we have less capacity for patience, perspective, and pause. So suddenly what should feel manageable becomes overwhelming. So if you have an ADHD brain like I do, your distractibility is already kind of high. So add in the clutter. And that clutter plus the noise and the time pressure is just a perfect storm for reactivity. So a spilled cup suddenly feels like a 5-alarm fire. Not because there's an actual fire, but because my nervous system reads it as immediate threat. And that's not a character flaw, that's a protector pattern. It's memory plus overload. And this is the moment where a lot of us might think that there's something wrong with us. We might think that I just have a short temper, or I'm bad at this, or I am not patient. But that's not true. We just have really strong circuits, and strong circuits can be rewired, but only when we notice them. Behind every trigger is usually a protector part. The rule keeper, the perfectionist, the peacekeeper, the fixer, the controller. The part learned its job really early on that if I control the environment, I stay safe. If I eliminate the mess, I avoid danger. If I'm quiet, I prevent escalation. That's your brain trying to protect you. It learned a long time ago what safety looks like. But under stress, the protector grabs the wheel and it's driving. And when it's driving, we don't get to respond. We react. So that protector part can move really fast unless you interrupt it. You have to silence the alarm before you can lead. And here's what that reset looks like. Physiological size. So 2 inhales, we'll do it together, okay? So here we go. 2 inhales, so inhale fully once. And then take another little sip of air. And then exhale with a long sigh. And sometimes I like to add in a little om. So let me explain why that works. When we voice a long om while triggered, 3 things tend to happen. First is the breath-brain reset. The sustained exhale increases vagal influence on the heart. It means the vagus nerve sending calming signals to the heart. So when that signal is strong, our heart rate slows down, our heart rate variability rises, and our body shifts out of fight or flight into a more relaxed state. So we're in stay and play mode. And the vagus is a long, important nerve that helps our body hit the brakes so that we feel steadier and more present. And the second is the resonance effect. So the vibration in the chest and the throat stimulates vagal pathways and soothes our vocal prosody, signaling that it is safe to connect to our system. And third is quieting the default mode network. When we use rhythmic toning, we're giving our brain a steady signal that it is safe. And that safety cue turns down the default mode network, and this network is the system that fuels mind wandering and rumination. So the mental loop loses steam. And when that loop is quiet, our prefrontal cortex comes back online to set a response strategy. So it essentially becomes your incident commander, which is why we feel the shift from reacting to intentionally responding. And a quiet default mode network activity is also linked to a softer sense of me. So attention widens, and it's easier to stay present and choose our next move. And I didn't learn that in a textbook. I learned that kind of accidentally. And then I dug deep into the why and the how. So this is what happened, and I explained it in my last module too. So both of my kids were screaming in my ears. They were having a fight with each other. So I picked them up, one in each arm, and at that time, they were so frustrated that they both decided to scream into my ears. And I was so triggered. My back was up, my whole body was tense, and I was about to lose it. But then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, I just chanted, or I just blurted out, "Om." And that threw them off completely. And yeah, they just bursted out laughing. I was laughing. And the whole vibe in that room just shifted in seconds, because our nervous systems were in the stay and play mode. We were having fun. So later, when I researched the science behind it, I realized I had interrupted my stress pattern. And now my 2-year-old sometimes hums when he's overwhelmed. He's already learning how to metabolize stress instead of explode. He still explodes, but I do catch him doing that a lot. Humming. Attention and regulation are trained through repetition. Our brain rewires what we practice repeatedly under pressure. Now here's another layer. Sometimes the trigger isn't originally ours. It was passed down. I noticed this when my mom is helping me with the kids. I love her, and I am so grateful for all her help. But sometimes she'll say something in a tone that instantly gets my back up. And not because she's wrong, but because that tone was paired with pressure that I felt when I was younger. And my body flags it before my mind can catch up. So I'll notice that, my back is up, my shoulders tight, my jaw's tight, my shoulders up, my posture is shifted. And that's the associative map reactivating. So here's the shift. Instead of merging with it, I name it. So I'll say something like, okay, I'm noticing that my jaw is tight, or that I'm clenching my teeth. I'll say out loud that this feels like an old pattern. So naming these body cues gives me back leadership. I don't suppress it or try to ignore it. I call it out. Call it out and ride the wave. And it gets easier with reps. Because under every trigger is usually a belief. So for example, for me, mess meant danger. Crying equals chaos. Disrespect might equal failure. These are all predictions because they're old memory patterns. The amygdala will flag what feels relevant, and the brain searches for confirmation. What you expect, you detect. So here's how we can reset. So first, you regulate the body. You silence the alarm. You do the physiological sighs or the ohms. And then second, you label the emotion. I feel irritated. I feel overwhelmed. I feel my body tensing up. And then third, you identify the belief underneath it. So mess equals danger, or if I don't control this, something bad happens. And then fourth, you reframe it. Update the belief while you're regulated. So it's not I'm failing, but you tell yourself that this is discomfort, but it's not danger. I can handle this. I am learning. And then fifth is repair if needed, because we can still snap. So not from panic, but from being grounded. So here's what I tell my brain. I'll say, okay, my body thinks mess equals danger because I can feel myself tensing up. I hear you loud and clear. I feel it happening in my body, but that's not needed right now because that was an old pattern. That was an old belief. I am here right now and I am safe. This is just a spilled cup and I am just a little tired. So our brain hears and installs these belief updates when our body feels safe, when we're regulated. Because we cannot rewire from panic. We rewire from regulation. And then we add in the reps because repetition matters. Every time we catch a trigger early, every time we pause, every time we reset before reacting, we carve new neural pathways. So unworked triggers fuel overcorrection, reactivity, withdrawal, or control. And kids start pairing big emotions with threat. But when we work through our triggers, we become more flexible. We're more curious. And then the family nervous systems will begin to organize around that grounded state. So here's that practical loop again. Notice the cue, reset the body, name the emotion, identify the belief, and then repair if needed. It doesn't have to be perfect. Repetition is more important than perfection. Imperfect reps still gets rewired. So think of it like learning to surf. At first, it's totally awkward. The stance is funky, the timing is off, and then each time we catch a wave, we learn. Sometimes we miss a wave, and sometimes a really big one knocks us over the board, and that's okay. It still counts as a rep. Keep going. And over time, it becomes more natural. You slip into flow, and you do it without thinking. Remember, we are not our trigger. We are not our pass. We are not our protector part. We are the adult who can lead. And when we lead our nervous system instead of being led by it, our children inherit safety instead of fear. And now, with all that being said, just know that even with all of this awareness, we will probably not catch every trigger in time. We will probably still snap sometimes, and we may raise our voice sometimes. We will still feel the surge, and we might miss the wave. And that's where the next skill becomes essential, because rupture is inevitable, and repair is what builds security. So let's go there in Module 5. Module 5, repair. The skill that builds security. So we just ended with something important. We will not catch every wave. We will not catch every trigger. We may raise our voice, and we'll probably react sometimes. But that doesn't disqualify us, because security is not built through perfection. It's built through repair. And let's be very clear about something, because rupture is inevitable. Let's take that pressure off, okay? Repair is intentional, and the rupture repair cycle is not damage. It's attachment being strengthened. When there's a rupture, so like a sharp tone or a snapped response, the nervous system registers disconnection. And if that is ignored, minimized, or justified, the child learns that connection is fragile, that love is conditional, and that big feelings cause distance. But when rupture is followed by repair, something very different happens. The nervous system learns that connection can break, but it'll return. Mistakes don't end relationships. Safety comes back. And that's attachment security taking root. It's not about perfection. It's in the repair. Now here's the science layer. When we own impact and name it clearly, the social engagement system reactivates. The child's nervous system receives a safety cue, and the prefrontal cortex comes back online, and learning reopens. But this is key. Repair is not defending yourself. Repair is not, I'm sorry, but. Repair is specific. Repair is behavioral, and it protects their identity. So for example, instead of you made me yell, it's I raised my voice, and that's not how I wanted to handle that. Instead of saying you're being too much, it's that I see that you're having big feelings, and I didn't stay as calm as I wanted to. Because when we model accountability without shame, children internalize responsibility without fear. And here's something powerful. When we redo a moment, we encode a new memory trace. We can literally say, let's try that again, and replay it differently. And that redo wires the future response. The brain does not need a perfect past. It just needs repeated, safe experiences. So this is where repair becomes the game changer, because repair is not just words. It's also how we deliver it. Our tone, our posture. Remember, silence the alarm first. So slow our breath down, unclench your jaw, drop those shoulders, create space between your shoulders and your ears. And then we speak from our grounded state and not from reaction. Because our physiology is the signal. We cannot repair from activation. We repair from regulation. So here's the simple repair loop. Recognize the rupture, name our part in it, and reassure connection. Restate the boundary calmly and move forward. So, for example, I snapped just now, and that's not how I want to speak to you. I love you. I love you very much, and that doesn't change. But we still don't throw toys. So let's try that again. So it's very clear, it's very grounded, and there's no drama in it. So sometimes repair doesn't happen immediately. Sometimes when we're both too activated, we need some space. And that's not avoidance. It's a very wise choice, because we cannot repair from activation. We repair from regulation. If our heart is still racing, our jaw is still clenched, and we notice that we're still holding tension, the same probably goes for our child. So give it a minute or two, or even the next day. Let the nervous systems simmer down. Let the stress chemistry metabolize. Let the body return to baseline. Repair works best when the alarm is silenced. So sometimes, that's 5 minutes later, or sometimes it's around bedtime. Sometimes it's the next morning. Okay? There have been nights where after their bedtime routine, I felt it in my heart that it wasn't how I wanted to handle that. And old programming, old me would say, that's fine, it's bedtime, just let it go. But I am committed to repair. So I'll be in bed with them and I'll say, hey, earlier I raised my voice. That wasn't about you. I'm really sorry I raised my voice. That was me overwhelmed, and you didn't deserve that tone. And then we can really feel the shift. Their body softens, their eyes soften, because they're actually checking, am I still safe with you? When we repair, we answer that question out loud. And here's something subtle but very powerful. Repair doesn't mean removing boundary. It means restoring connection. We can say, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have snapped. And still say, we still don't hit each other. Connection and structure can coexist. And that's what calm authority looks like. It's attuned leadership. And sometimes giving space before repair actually strengthens it. Because when we return regulated, we're modeling something even deeper. I can feel big things, and I can calm down, and I can come back. That teaches recovery and resilience. And it teaches that relationships don't fracture under pressure. And here's the truth about repair. Unrepaired ruptures don't just affect children. They sit in you too, because that guilt will just accumulate. The tension will linger. Distance can grow quieter. Repair cleans the air in both directions. It restores safety and ease to the room. And here's the refrain that we can hold. Repair does not weaken authority. It strengthens it, because authority built on fear collapses. Authority built on accountability stabilizes. When a child sees that we own our behavior, they learn how to own theirs. When a child sees us regulate after dysregulating, they learn how to recover. When a child sees connection return after a conflict, they learn that relationships are resilient. That is emotional mastery. And that matters deeply, because many of us grew up without repair. Maybe that was yelling. Maybe there was silence. Maybe there was just distance. But rarely was this told to me. I shouldn't have spoken that way. So let's try again. So if repair feels unnatural, that's not because we're incapable. It's because we didn't get the reps in. And remember, attention and regulation are trained through repetition. Our brain rewires around us what we repeatedly practice under pressure. Repair is a rep. Every apology, every reset, every redo is a rep. And just like learning how to surf, it feels unnatural at first. But in time, that will flow naturally into our brain's response. And here's another thing about repair. When rupture hits, our safety system starts scanning. One protector reaches for control by demanding perfection. That's self-sacrifice. Because it asks us to override our needs to make sure we never mess up again. The regulated stance is commitment. When I miss it, I return to calm, to connection, to leadership. I regulate my body first with 3 slow exhales. I name what just happened without defense, and I own my impact with a simple repair. I raised my voice, or that was unfair. I'm calming my body now, and I am here. I love you. And then I invite reconnection at the smallest little dose. So it can be a gentle touch on the hand, a shared breath, which is when I invite my little one to blow out the candle, which I'll explain in a later module, or a reset phrase. And I close the loop by naming the value I'm choosing next. I choose patience. I can start again. Because security isn't built because nothing ever breaks. Security is built because things break and we can piece them back together. When recovery becomes normal, fear decreases, trust increases, and flexibility shows up in lived experiences. The pause before reacting, the pivot to a kinder tone, the choice to reconnect even after a miss. That's how adaptable families are built. So Module 4 was about managing triggers. Module 5 is about mastering relational resilience, because the goal of present parenting is not to avoid rupture. It is to build a family nervous system that knows how to recover. And when recovery becomes normal, fear decreases and trust increases. So now we move on to the next layer. And once you can repair, we can then shift from recovery to growth, because parenting is not just about regulation and repair. It's also about who we become in the process. Module 6, thriving from recovery to growth. So far, we've built the foundation. We've learned how to regulate, reframe, and repair. We've learned how to stabilize our state under pressure, how to interrupt triggers, and how to return to connection after rupture. And now we can shift from recovery to growth, because parenting isn't just about regulation and repair. It's about who we become in the process. And I want to name something that a lot of us quietly carry. We think thriving means someday. Someday when the kids sleep, or someday when work slows down, or someday when the house is less chaotic. Someday when we finally have more time. But thriving doesn't arrive when conditions improve. Thriving is built when life is happening. It's built in small, deliberate deposits that stabilize our nervous system before the next surge hits. Because if we only focus on putting out fires, we just stay in survival mode. And survival mode is just fight or flight running the show. Thriving moves us towards stay and play. Not because the chaos disappears, but because we become more resourced inside it. This isn't about being superhuman. It's about building capacity. Capacity gives us breathing room. It gives us perspective. It makes us more grounded. So we don't treat thriving like a luxury. We treat it like infrastructure. And we build that infrastructure through anchors. And I call them the 5 M's. They're not rules, they're anchors. And the order really matters. So first is mantra. And this happens before we even get out of bed. We say the mantra in bed before we become conscious as we wake up, before we touch our phones, before the demands of the day start. So a mantra is a very simple, clear instruction to our brain. So for example, today I'm going to focus on play. Today I'm going to focus on being present with my kids. Today I'm going to dedicate energy on working out. So This is about orienting our identity before the pressure arrives. Our brain scans for what we prime it to notice. So when we choose our focus first thing, we stabilize our state before the day pulls at us. So the second is movement. The moment we step out of bed, we move something. A quick dance in the bedroom, shaking your arms, a short vinyasa, or even just opening up your chest. Sometimes I'll do handstands and headstands. And early movement metabolizes leftover stress chemistry, and it boosts our natural morning cortisol and dopamine curve. So waking up focused and motivated. It also helps clear the brain fog from sleep. So while we sleep, our brain runs kind of a rinse cycle, moving fluid through the brain to wash out metabolic waste. So a gentle morning movement will help that process complete so that we feel clearer and safer in our body. It tells our system we're not frozen and that we're mobilized. And this can absolutely expand later into a full workout, a walk, a yoga class, or something more comprehensive. But early movement signals to our nervous system that we're alive and active. Third is morning sun, and this is a non-negotiable. Looking outside or being outside before screen time, even if it's cloudy, even if it's 1 minute, because light anchors our circadian rhythm and stabilizes our mood and energy. Morning light tells the brain that, hey, it's daytime, we're safe, and we can move. It anchors our natural morning cortisol rise so we can feel alert early rather than wired and crashing later. And the morning light also drives signal from our eyes to our brain's internal clock that supports serotonin production and activity, which is one reason sunlight lifts mood and steadies stress. And this is where we can stack habits. So movement and morning sun together, a short walk, walking the dog, or standing outside with a long exhale. We're not aiming for perfection. We're giving our nervous system a signal before we feed it stimulation. Because once we reach for our phone first, we're already letting the world set our nervous system tone. Fourth is meditation. And we're just going to simplify this. Meditation does not have to be long. It doesn't have to be silent. It doesn't have to be perfect. Meditation is simply training attention. Practice returning to the breath, to your body. And it's the same skill we use when we're triggered. So even 1 minute of focused breathing strengthens that pathway. When we sit and bring awareness to our breath, we shift out of fight or flight mode and towards stay and play. Our prefrontal cortex comes back online, and our perspective widens, our tone softens, and we regain choice. And meditation is not about escaping our life. It's practice for real life. And meditation is not about escaping our life. It's rehearsal for real life. So fifth is mindfulness and mindset. Think of this as weeding and planting. So mindfulness is weeding the garden, noticing what's happening in our body, noticing any tension, notice when our breath is shallow, or some physical cues would be our shoulders are up, we feel tense. Notice when we're already irritated before anyone has done anything. And mindset is planting your garden. It's choosing what we practice next. This is discomfort. This is not danger. Or I can handle this. I can start again. What we repeat becomes what we default to under pressure, because neurons that fire together wire together. So strengthening that pathway with each rep. So if we don't choose it intentionally, our old patterns will. Our thoughts are not random, they are rehearsals. The thoughts we practice become the beliefs we reach for when things get really hard. So mindfulness gives us awareness, and mindset gives us direction. And together, they build identity. And here's what matters most. We don't build these habits to become perfect parents. We build them so regulate becomes easier, so reframe becomes clearer, and repair becomes more natural. Because when we're resourced, we respond. When we're depleted, we react. And that's physiology, not character. So for this module, we choose just one anchor, just one, for 7 days. Not all 5, just one for now. Because when we're overwhelmed, we don't need more pressure. We need consistency. And once that anchor feels natural, we build from there. And over time, we stack them intentionally. and the growth compounds. What starts as one stabilizing habit becomes a system, and when the system is in place, the shift isn't linear, it's exponential. We earn that growth through repetition, not intensity. And here's the shift. When we regulate consistently, when we reframe intentionally, and when we repair cleanly, something changes. We stop surviving our days. We start leading them, and we start showing up as who we actually are. We become more grounded, we're clearer, we're more intentional. Not because life is easier, but because we are stronger inside it. And when that becomes normal, our whole home system changes. Our tone changes, our pacing changes. Our children feel it, our partners feel it, we feel it. And thriving isn't separate from parenting, it supports it. Because when we're resourced, we lead differently. So next, we're going to zoom one level further because thriving isn't about personal regulation. It's about how we structure our time, our commitments, and our values as a family. Our calendar is a nervous system document. And if our calendar is chaotic, our home life will feel chaotic. So let's dive in Module 7. Module 7, operating as a team. So far, we've built the foundation. We've learned how to regulate, reframe, and repair. We've learned how to stabilize our state under pressure, how to interrupt triggers, and how to return to connection after rupture. And now we can shift from recovery to growth because parenting is not just about regulation and repair. It's about who we become in the process. And one of the biggest shifts in our home has been this. We operate as a team. Parenting is not me versus my kids. It's about us solving the moment together. On a fire crew, no one operates alone. And let's be honest, there's definitely blame. There's definitely calling each other out. And there's fire hall humor that can be sometimes ruthless. We might roast you for forgetting a tool, but we'll still pull you out of a burning building. That's the culture. Underneath the jokes and the edge, no one gets left behind. We don't abandon someone when they're overwhelmed. We stabilize each other. We protect each other. We bring our unique skills to solve complex and sometimes even life or death challenges. And we rely on each other. And that mindset shifted how I parent. Leaders build strong teams. And strong teams make everyone feel important, accountable, and proud to be part of something. So when my 4-year-old has a different idea about what she wants to do, like wanting to keep playing when we need to leave, I don't go straight into command mode. I remind her that we're on the same team. So if our goal is to go to the park, then that means that we need to put the crayons away. Or if our goal is to get there before it gets dark, then that means we have to put on our snow pants and jacket now. I make the goal visible. I don't position myself as the obstacle. I position us as collaborators. We're not stopping play because I said so. We're choosing our next action because it moves the team forward. And something interesting happens when we do this. The resistance softens, not because the boundary disappeared, but the direction is clear. We're not fighting with each other. We're aligned toward a shared outcome. This is what value-based structure looks like. It's not permissive. It's not authoritarian. It's directional. It says, here's where we're going, and here's what it takes to get there. Let's do it together. And this matters because our calendar reflects our nervous system. If we overcommit, overschedule, and rush constantly, our home will feel frantic. If we prioritize connection, rest, and shared goals, our home feels steadier. Operating as a team means we don't outsource connection. It means we choose intentionally. It means sometimes we say no to extra activities so we can say yes to skating together, climbing together, or cooking together, or just being together, especially in the early years, because strong roots build strong independence later. When our children know they're a part of a team, something shifts inside them. They feel secure, they feel needed, they feel capable and not controlled. And that's the culture we're building. Not perfect behavior, not constant calm, but shared responsibility, shared resilience, and shared direction. When we regulate, reframe, and repair consistently, we operate as a team. We don't just change behavior. We change how we function together. We build groundedness, we build trust, and we build pride in belonging. That's leadership at home. Module 8, roots before wings. So we've talked about regulating ourselves, we've talked about repairing rupture, we've talked about operating as a team. Now we're going to go deeper into something that quietly shapes everything: attachment. There are many parenting styles out there. There are many different philosophies, different systems, different approaches. And I want to say that clearly before I share our experience. I'm not here to tell anyone there's only one right way. What I can share is what we chose and why it aligned with our values and our nervous systems. So we chose to model attachment theory because we've seen powerful results from it in our own home. But interestingly, that was not my original plan. Before I was even pregnant, people were telling me how great sleep training was. When I was pregnant, every time I was at the dog park, I would hear it again and again. Sleep training is the best way. It's everything. And you'll thank yourself later. And I was completely sold. It made logical sense. It sounded efficient. It sounded structured. Then I had my baby. And when she cried at night, something in me just couldn't ignore it. It didn't feel natural to hear my baby cry and choose not to respond. And I thought about something very simple. When I have a bad dream as an adult, I often roll over and reach for my partner. Even if I don't wake him up fully, I'll seek comfort. I seek grounding. I want the reassurance that I'm safe and that it was just a dream. So to expect a baby with an underdeveloped nervous system to cope alone in distress didn't really align with my instincts. Not because other approaches don't work for some families, but because this felt right for our nervous systems. So we chose co-sleeping. And practically, it was just easier for me to just roll over and nurse and then fall back asleep than to get up and walk into another room to do that. It worked for us. And here's another layer that matters. Both my husband and I are firefighters, so we're already used to this interrupted sleep. And we would actually joke in those early months that we were just working at Adelaide, which is like one of the busiest fire halls in the country, except we didn't get a day off. But we were primed for sleep interruption. Our nervous systems were familiar with it. And I completely understand how chronic sleep interruption for someone who has never experienced it would feel brutal on their system. It is hard and impacts regulation. It impacts patience. It affects our mood, and I don't minimize that. But for us, the deeper question became what builds long-term security. Attachment theory is pretty simple at its core. Felt safety precedes exploration. Security builds independence. Roots before wings. When a child knows deeply that connection is accessible, they explore more freely. When a nervous system feels safe, curiosity expands. When connection is predictable, autonomy grows naturally. And we've seen that, not only in theory, but in our home. Co-sleeping wasn't about indulgence. It wasn't about avoiding independence. It was more about responding to need so independence could develop later from a very stable base. And it doesn't mean we're hovering over the child. It doesn't mean eliminating boundaries. It doesn't mean we never say no. It means we prioritize connection early so autonomy has a strong foundation. Strong roots build strong independence. When our children know they are safe at night, safe in distress, safe when overwhelmed, everything shifts. They don't cling more. They explore more. They don't become fragile, and they become more secure. Because security doesn't come from forced independence. It comes from felt safety. And this applies beyond sleep. It applies to emotions. It applies to transitions. It applies to separation. It applies to how we respond when they're scared. We are building nervous systems that no connection returns. When connection is stable, confidence grows. Roots before wings. That's the philosophy. And now we're going to talk about something really closely related. Exposure, socialization, and how much of our children's development we outsource versus intentionally cultivate. Because connection precedes exposure. So let's move on to Module 9. Module 9. Connection before exposure. So we just talked about roots before wings. Now we're going to talk about exposure, because this is where a lot of modern parenting pressure shows up. Socialization, daycare activities, early independence. And I want to approach this carefully and honestly. For many families, daycare is necessary. Sometimes it's the only option. Sometimes it's the best option. This is not about judgment. It's just about understanding development. Young children do not need early exposure as much as they need early attachment. Parallel play is developmentally normal. Toddlers don't need forced interaction. They don't need constant stimulation. They need safety. They need connection. They need predictable attachment so they can safely explore. Connection precedes confidence. And here's something I've heard over and over again from parents I've spoken to over the years. Their regret is usually about connection. A lot of times they'll say, I didn't realize I didn't know my child anymore. I missed all the small changes and I wish I had slowed down. That doesn't mean that no one should use daycare. It just means that we need to be intentional about connection time. If a child spends 8 or 9 hours apart from a parent, then comes home and is rushed to extracurricular activities, and then bedtime happens quickly because they're so tired, when does real connection happen? Connection is not proximity, it's presence. And this is where I use the plant analogy. If you water a plant on a rigid schedule, so every Tuesday, the same amount, no matter the sunlight, no matter the season, it might look fine for a while, and it might even look vibrant. But one day, without any warning, it'll collapse from root rot. I've had many plants like that. And then I learned, because when you pay attention, when you stick your finger in the soil, and when you observe the leaves, when you respond to what it actually needs, you build really strong roots. And it might be a slower growth, but that growth is resilient. And the same is true for children. Taking time in the early years to nurture and establish roots is nature. It's not regression, it's biology. Polar bear cubs stayed with their mothers for years. Ducklings follow their parents until they're ready to separate. Mammals do not rush independence, they build security first. And security builds autonomy. And this is where we have to ask ourselves honest questions. Are we enrolling our children in activities because it aligns with our values, or because we feel pressure? Are we overcommitting because we're afraid they'll fall behind, or because we haven't defined what actually matters to us? Because when we overschedule, our nervous system stays in mild fight or flight. But when we protect connection, our home stays closer to stay and play. Children don't need constant stimulation. They need co-regulation. They need shared presence. They need to know they can explore and return. And return is everything. When children know they can return, they venture a little further. When connection feels unstable, they'll cling. So this module isn't about withdrawing from the world. It's about sequencing development correctly. Roots first, exposure second. Security before performance. And when we choose that order intentionally, something shifts in the entire family system. There is less rush, less comparison, less frantic energy. And there is more groundedness, more depth, and more knowing. And that groundedness becomes the soil where confidence grows. Not forced confidence, not performative independence, but real confidence. Now that we've grounded in attachment and connection, we move to something practical. Because a connection doesn't mean chaos. Security doesn't mean permissiveness. We still need structure, and that's where we refine boundaries. So let's go to Module 10. Module 10, Boundaries Without Fear. So we've talked about roots, we've talked about connection, now we refine structure. Because connection does not mean chaos, and attachment does not mean permissiveness. Security and structure are not opposites, they're partners. And this is where a lot of parenting conversation gets a little confusing, because we swing between two extremes. Either we control through fear, or we avoid structure to preserve connection. But boundaries are not the enemy of attachment. Fear is. So let's clarify something. Boundaries are not about controlling behavior. They're about teaching cause and effect. Consequences that mirror cause and effect teach mastery. and punishment teaches avoidance. When we punish, the nervous system shifts into fight or flight. The child's brain is no longer asking, what did I learn? It's asking, am I safe? And when safety is in question, learning shuts down. But when consequences are calm, predictable, and tied directly to behavior, something different happens. The brain stays online. The prefrontal cortex remains engaged. Reflection is possible. If the toy is thrown away, the toy goes away for a while. Not because the child is bad, but because throwing breaks things. This is not about emotional punishment. This is about environmental feedback. And the tone matters. We can say, we don't hit in this family without shame, without threat, and without withdrawing love. Because warmth with boundaries lowers threat while maintaining predictability. And predictability regulates the nervous systems. So when boundaries are consistent, children relax more, not less, because they know what to expect. So authority built on fear creates compliance. Authority built on calm creates capacity. Compliance says, I behave so I don't get in trouble. And capacity says, I understand why this matters. We're not raising children who behave because they are afraid. We are raising children who understand why their behavior matters. And that requires us to stay regulated while holding the line. Because if we escalate emotionally, the boundary may be correct, but the delivery will be missed. And this is where Regulate Reframe Repair lives inside structure. We have to regulate first, so we silence the alarm, and then we move from fight or flight to stay and play. And then we reframe. This is behavior, not identity. This is a learning moment. This is a skill building moment, and not a personal attack. And then we repair if needed. So if we snapped or we slipped. So boundaries without fear protect dignity. When we protect identity while addressing behavior, growth is possible. You're not bad. This choice didn't work. That distinction shapes self-concept. And here's something subtle but powerful. Children push boundaries not because they want chaos, but because they're testing safety. They're asking, will this line hold? Is this predictable? Will you still love me? And when the line holds calmly, their nervous system settles. Structure is not restriction, it is containment, and containment feels safe. Now, this doesn't mean we become rigid. It means we are clear about our values, clear about our expectations, clear about our tone. Because when boundaries are unclear, we default to emotion. And when boundaries are clear, we default to leadership. And this is how we move from reacting in the moment to building a family culture. A culture where connection and structure coexist. Where love is constant and unconditional and expectations are steady. Where mistakes are allowed but not ignored. Where consequences teach instead of threaten. This is calm authority. And this is where the system starts to feel stable. So now we've covered internal regulation, emotional processing, triggers, repair, thriving, attachment, and structure. Next, we're going to talk about something that quietly erodes all of us if we're not careful. Attention. Because if we don't protect our focus, we cannot protect our presence. So, let's dive in Module 11. Module 11, practice focus, not distraction. So we've built regulation, we've built repair, and we've built attachment and structure. Now we need to protect one thing that makes all of this possible, attention. Because if we don't protect our focus, we cannot protect our presence. We are living in a world engineered to distract us. Notifications, infinite scrolling, dopamine hits on demand. Our nervous system is constantly being pulled into micro fight or flight states without even us realizing it. Distraction trains the brain to seek novelty instead of depth. And what we practice becomes what we default to under pressure. If we practice distraction all day, we will default to distraction when our child melts down. If we practice focus, we become better at focusing. Think of it this way. We don't get better at surfing by practicing hockey. We become better at the things we practice. So, practice focus. And this is not about demonizing phones or technology. This is about understanding our nervous system. So single task, so just doing one thing, increases depth. It lowers sympathetic noise and it builds attentional stamina. And multitasking keeps the system mildly activated. An activated system reacts faster and regulates slower. So let's make this practical. We don't need to throw away our phones. We need to create intentional boundaries. No phones at the dinner table, not because it's moral, but because presence is relational currency. We don't scroll half listening to our child telling a story. We put the phone down and give them full attention and eye contact. That signals safety. We choose moments in the day where we are fully there. Our children already know how to focus. They don't need to be taught how to be present. They live in it. Have you ever noticed what happens when we walk to the park in the snow with a toddler? We have a destination. They have curiosity. So my daughter will stop every few steps. She'll scoop snow in her mittens and she'll try to taste it. She'll watch how it melts on her glove. And she'll stare at how the light hits the ice. She forgets that we're even walking somewhere because she's completely immersed in what's in front of her. That's presence. She is fully in stay and play. But over time, we move further away from that state. We rush, we think ahead. We live in the next thing instead of the thing right in front of us. Now let's address monotony. One of the hardest seasons for presence is repetition. So after the honeymoon stage of a newborn, so when the love hormones are high and everything feels magical, after that stage, there comes a point where the oxytocin haze softens and the chronic sleep deprivation settles in. The days start to blur because we just are on this rinse, repeat cycle. We feed, we change, we rock the baby, repeat the same lullabies, the same middle of the night wakings, and then in the toddler stage, it shifts again. The same book for the 100th time, or the same, watch me. The same negotiations about putting on pants or shoes or socks. The same requests when we're trying to just leave the house. And this is when we're tempted to mentally check out, to scroll on the phone, to escape, to disassociate just enough to survive the repetition. But repetition is not the enemy. It's training. It's rehearsal. If we stay present in the mundane, we can stay steady under pressure. And the way we show up in these small moments is who we become in the big ones. Focus is not something we wait to feel. It's something we practice. Because microbursts of intentional focus repeated daily build stamina without burnout. We don't need to be present for 12 hours straight. We need to practice returning to eye contact, returning to breathe, returning to the moment. That return is the rep. And when we practice focus instead of distraction, something shifts. We feel more grounded. And conflict can be resolved more diplomatically because attention is containment and containment feels safe. And this doesn't mean we never feel overwhelmed. It means we notice it a lot sooner. We stabilize faster and we reconnect more intentionally. And our children learn something profound. They learn that their presence matters, not just their performance. Now we've built regulation, repair, roots, structure, focus. And there's one final layer because all of this regulation, repair, attachment, structure, and attention is shaping something deeper. It's shaping our identity. So let's go there in Module 12. Module 12, identity, who we become through this. So we've talked about regulating, we've talked about reframing, we've talked about repairing, we've built roots, we've set boundaries, we've practiced focus, and now we zoom out to the deepest layer, identity. Because parenting is not just about shaping children, it's shaping us. And here's something I want to say clearly. This is not about becoming a better mom. It's about becoming a more regulated human, a more grounded leader, a clearer thinker, a calmer nervous system under pressure. When we practice regulate, reframe, repair consistently, something changes internally. We stop seeing ourselves as reactive. We stop narrating that I just lose it. We stop telling the story that we're impatient, overwhelmed, or failing. We begin to see ourselves as someone who can pause, someone who can reset, and someone who can return to themselves. Identity shifts through repetition. What we repeat becomes what we default to under pressure. What we default to under pressure becomes who we believe we are. So when we regulate under stress, we start identifying as grounded. When we reframe instead of spiral, we start identifying as capable. When we repair instead of withdraw, we start identifying as accountable. This is not just parenting. This is leadership training. And here's something many high-functioning moms feel but don't always say out loud. There's a quiet belief that in order to be a good mother, we have to self-sacrifice. We have to disappear. We have to put ourselves last. We have to put everything on hold. But self-sacrifice breeds resentment. Commitment builds stability. Self-sacrifice keeps score, and commitment takes ownership. Self-sacrifice says, I have to be perfect so I don't mess this up. And commitment says, when I miss it, I return. I try again. Because we're not trying to be flawless. We are becoming the kind of women who can return to connection, return to being calm, return to leadership. When our children grow up in that atmosphere, they internalize something powerful. They learn that mistakes don't define them. They learn that repair is normal. They learn that strong people can apologize. They learn that emotions are survivable. And they learn that connections return. And we learn something too. We learn that we can be present mothers, ambitious women, and we can build secure attachment and still build ourselves. We can regulate and still rise. We can have our cake and eat it too. Because when we build our nervous system first, we stop operating from guilt. We stop parenting from depletion. We stop leading from survival mode. We operate from groundedness. And groundedness scales. It scales into our marriage. It reflects into our friendship. It reflects into our work. It reflects into how we show up in the world. Leaders build strong teams. They create environments where everyone on the team feels accountable, important, and proud to belong. And that's what we're building in our homes. Not perfect behavior, not constant calm, but a culture where groundedness is normal, where repair is expected, where everyone contributes and no one gets left behind. We become the kind of parents our children feel safe with, and the kind of leaders who build strong teams our families are proud to be part of. That's leadership, and that is the shift. And that's how we rise without disappearing. Thank you so much for joining me in this masterclass, and this is work that I really care deeply about, building grounded parents and strong family systems. If something in this resonated with you, please let me know in the comments what landed and tell me what you want me to expand on next. And if you're committed to building this kind of leadership in your home, subscribe and stay with me. We're building grounded families from the inside out, nervous systems that can lead under pressure, and teams that don't fracture when things get hard. Leadership at home is learned under pressure. And if you want the written field guide to support this work, it's linked below. And keep it close for when you need it. And if you're serious about closing the gap between your values and your reactions, subscribe and stick around for the season, because we're building this one skill at a time.